I defended a teen cashier from a bully. Now the store is upset with me and the customer wants an apology from everyone. Was I wrong to step in? So, this happened yesterday, and I'm still wondering if I overreacted. I, 35F, was doing my usual weekly grocery shopping at a local supermarket. It was a busy afternoon, and the line at the checkout was pretty long. I was waiting patiently when I noticed the woman in front of me, probably mid-50s, becoming increasingly agitated as the teenage cashier, who couldn't have been older than 17, was scanning her items. The cashier seemed a bit flustered. I could tell she was probably new, making a few mistakes here and there, but nothing serious. The older woman, however, was not having it. She started muttering under her breath, rolling her eyes and tapping her foot. Finally, when the cashier accidentally scanned an item twice and needed to call for a supervisor to void it, the woman lost it. She started berating the poor girl, saying things like, "How hard can it be to do this job? You can't even do basic tasks. You're wasting people's time." She just kept going on, and the more she yelled, the more flustered the cashier got until she started tearing up. I stood there for a second, hoping the lady would cool down, but she didn't. The poor cashier was clearly trying her best to keep it together. That's when I stepped in. I said to her, "You don't have the right to treat someone like that. She's doing her best, and it's just a mistake. If you're so unhappy, maybe you should try working like her for a day and see how easy it is." The woman looked stunned and told me to mind my own business. I replied, "It is my business when you're making a kid cry over something as stupid as groceries." The cashier's supervisor had arrived by then and stepped in to handle the situation, and the woman stormed off, still muttering and cursing. After she left, the cashier thanked me with teary eyes, but a couple of people behind me in line gave me looks like I was the one who had done something wrong. Now I'm second-guessing myself. So Reddit, Eita for telling her off? So after posting the original story, I couldn't stop thinking about the whole situation. I was convinced I did the right thing at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I started second-guessing myself. Especially because of those looks I got from the people in line behind me. They were subtle, but it felt like a judgment, like they thought I was overstepping. I mean, sure, it's not my job to defend the cashier, but it just felt like someone had to do something. You know? Anyway, after reading through a bunch of the comments here, I realized that maybe I wasn't totally alone in how I felt. The support was overwhelming, which was a huge relief. Honestly, I've been wondering if I'm one of those people who just jumps into situations without fully thinking them through, but in this case, it seemed like most people agreed that the older woman was out of line. It's not that I went into that situation wanting a confrontation. I'm not the kind of person who seeks out conflict or enjoys drama. Far from it. But when I see someone being mistreated, especially someone who's younger or in a vulnerable position, I just can't stand by and watch it happen. I ended up going back to the same supermarket a few days later. Not because I was trying to make a statement or anything, but because, well, it's my regular grocery store. I wasn't really expecting to run into anyone from that day, but as luck would have it, the same cashier was working. And of course, as fate would have it, she was the one who ended up ringing me up again. She seemed a bit more composed this time, but I could still sense some nervous energy around her. I don't blame her, though. If I had gone through that experience of being publicly berated at work, I'd probably be on edge for a while, too. So I smiled at her and asked her how her day was going. She recognized me almost immediately and smiled back, though it was a little shy. I could tell she appreciated the gesture, but she didn't bring up the incident directly, which made me think she was probably trying to put it behind her. I didn't want to push or bring up any bad memories for her, so I just kept the conversation light. I told her she was doing a great job, just casually, like it was no big deal. And you could see the way her shoulders relaxed a bit after that. But here's where things get a little weird. As I was finishing up and getting ready to leave, the manager from the other day, the one who had stepped in when the older woman went off, came over to me. At first, I thought maybe he wanted to thank me or something, but his expression was kind of serious, almost irritated. He started by saying something like, "We really appreciate your patience the other day," which threw me off. I thought maybe he was upset with me for stepping in the way I did, even though I wasn't rude to anyone but the older lady who was out of control. He went on to explain that while they appreciated customers standing up for their employees, they also have certain protocols for dealing with situations like the one I had gotten involved in. He didn't explicitly say I was wrong, but the vibe I got was that he felt I had overstepped by getting involved. He said they train their staff to handle difficult customers, and that it's the supervisor's responsibility to step in when things get out of hand, not the customers. It was kind of awkward because I didn't expect to be told off for doing what I thought was the right thing. I just stood there, nodding, unsure of how to respond. I get that they don't want customers causing scenes, but in this case, the scene was already happening before I said anything. If anything, I felt like I helped calm it down by stepping in when I did. The cashier was clearly overwhelmed, and the older woman was only getting more aggressive. The supervisor wasn't even there until after the fact, so if I hadn't said something, that poor girl might have just been left to fend for herself. I mean, the manager wasn't wrong in saying they have their own way of handling things, but what was I supposed to do? Just stand there and let that lady tear into her? After the manager finished his little speech, he awkwardly thanked me again, but it felt kind of forced. I could tell he was just trying to smooth things over, and honestly, it left a bad taste in my mouth. I get that he's got a job to do, and he probably deals with difficult customers all the time, but it made me feel like maybe I shouldn't have said anything in the first place. And that really pissed me off, to be honest. It's not like I was looking for a pat on the back or anything, but being told I essentially shouldn't have gotten involved after seeing someone get bullied like that? It just didn't sit right with me. On my way out of the store, I couldn't help but replay the whole situation in my head, trying to figure out if I really had overstepped. I don't think I did. I mean, sure, maybe in a perfect world, we'd all just keep our heads down and let the professionals handle everything. But in the real world, sometimes you have to act when you see someone being treated unfairly. And that's what this felt like to me. Unfair. The kicker is, a woman who had been in line behind me during the original incident caught up with me in the parking lot. I didn't recognize her at first, but she stopped me and said, "I saw what happened the other day. You did the right thing." She had one of those no-nonsense tones, like she wasn't someone who wasted time with pleasantries or sugarcoating things. It was nice to hear, honestly. I'd been second-guessing myself so much, especially after what the manager had said, but her words brought me back to center. It's amazing how just a simple acknowledgement from a stranger can make you feel validated. So that's where I'm at now. I still feel like I did the right thing, even if the store's management disagrees. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't the easy thing, and I guess that's what I need to hold on to. But now I'm wondering, what would you all have done in my shoes? Was I really overstepping by stepping in, or should I have just kept my mouth shut and let the employees handle it? Update 2. Okay, things took a bit of an unexpected turn after that last update. I've been going back and forth about whether or not I should keep quiet and just move on, but what happened next made that impossible. So, after my awkward encounter with the manager, I decided to avoid that store for a little while. Not out of shame or guilt, but more because I didn't want to deal with the weird vibes from management again. It just felt uncomfortable, and I didn't want to put myself in that situation if I didn't have to. However, life doesn't care about your plans sometimes, right? Fast forward to about 2 weeks after the original incident, and I ended up having to make a last-minute run to that same supermarket. It was one of those situations where I had no choice, because I needed a few things immediately, and it was the only place nearby that was still open. I convinced myself that enough time had passed, and surely no one would remember me at this point. I mean, it wasn't like I'd done anything crazy. Just stood up for someone who was being mistreated. Anyway, I walked in, grabbed the items I needed, and headed to the checkout. And guess who was there, ringing people up? Yep, the same cashier. The girl who'd been torn apart by that awful customer weeks ago. I wasn't sure if she'd recognize me or not, but I figured I'd just act normal. I didn't want to make things awkward for her by bringing it up again, and honestly, I didn't even know if she'd want to talk about it. As it turns out, I didn't have to wonder for long. As soon as I got to her register, her face lit up. Like, she actually smiled at me in a way that made it clear she remembered what had happened. She didn't say anything at first, but as she scanned my items, she finally broke the silence and said, "I've been hoping I'd see you again." I was caught off guard. I didn't think much about it when I stepped in that day, but it clearly left an impression on her. She went on to say that after the incident, she had been feeling really down about her job and had even considered quitting. Apparently, she'd been struggling with rude customers for weeks, and the situation with the older woman was just the breaking point for her. It had gotten so bad that she'd gone home that night and told her parents she was thinking about finding something else, maybe even dropping out of school for a bit to figure things out. But here's where it gets interesting. She said that my stepping in, even though it was just a few words, made her rethink everything. She told me it was the first time someone had stood up for her in a long time, and it reminded her that not everyone is awful, even when the world feels like it's full of angry, impatient people. It sounds a little dramatic, but I could tell she meant it. She wasn't just saying this to be polite. She said that after that day, she had a long talk with her manager, the same one who had come over after the incident, and told him how close she had come to quitting. Now, here's where things get a little strange. After hearing her side of things, I asked her what the manager had said during their conversation. And according to her, he was actually pretty supportive. He apologized for not stepping in sooner and told her that she was a valued employee, but that he couldn't always predict when customers would act out like that. He admitted that sometimes customers are just jerks, plain and simple, and it's not always about the employee doing something wrong. But the twist is, apparently the store had been receiving complaints for a while about how long the lines were and how inexperienced some of the newer staff were. And while it didn't excuse the way the older woman had treated her, the manager told her they were under a lot of pressure from corporate to move customers through the lines faster. That's why he had been a little cold toward me when I stepped in. Not because he thought I was wrong, but because the whole situation was a sore spot for him. Corporate had been breathing down his neck, and he was just trying to keep things under control. I asked her if she felt like that was fair, and she kind of shrugged. She said she understood where he was coming from, but it didn't change the fact that she'd been treated horribly. The thing that stuck with me, though, was that she told me she'd been getting way more support from her coworkers and customers after the incident. Word had apparently spread around the store, and now the other cashiers were making a point to check in with each other more often, making sure everyone was doing okay when things got stressful. I thought that was pretty cool. It's nice to think that something positive came out of all this. But then, just when I thought the conversation was winding down, she dropped a bombshell. She told me that after the older woman stormed out of the store that day, she had come back. Not the same day, but a few days later. Apparently, she had marched right back into the store and demanded to speak with the manager. She was still upset, still ranting about how she had been disrespected by a customer, me, and how she deserved better treatment. She wanted an apology from the cashier, from the manager, and get this, from me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman, who had been completely in the wrong from the start, was now demanding apologies from everyone involved. The cashier said the manager had politely told her that no apology would be coming from the staff and that she had been out of line with her behavior. But the kicker? The woman apparently threatened to escalate the issue to corporate if she didn't get what she wanted. So now I'm left wondering what that means. Is she actually going to try to get the staff in trouble over something that was clearly her fault? I doubt anything will come of it. But the idea that someone could be so entitled, so completely unwilling to reflect on their behavior, is mind-boggling to me. It's one thing to be frustrated in the moment, but to come back days later and double down on it? That's a whole new level of petty. I told the cashier that if anything ever comes of it and they need me to back them up, I'd be happy to. I've got no problem telling corporate exactly what happened if it comes to that. Though I really hope it doesn't. The whole thing seems so ridiculous, but I guess there are some people in the world who just can't let things go. So yeah, that's where things stand now. I thought the situation was behind me, but apparently it's still lingering. I'm not sure if I'll hear more about it or if it'll just blow over, but if something else happens, I'll be sure to let you all know.